Hey, what's going on, guys? In this video we're going to create a front-end JavaScript application that uses the Parcel bundler and the Reddit API to search articles, and we can limit them from either 5, 10, 25, 50, or 100, and we can also sort them by relevance or by date. Alright, so if you have taken my Udemy course, my Modern JavaScript from the Beginning course, and you like the type of projects that we did in here, this is going to be very similar. And if you haven't taken the course and you do like this project, I'd highly recommend it. I'll throw in a promo link in the description for $10. And as you can see, it's a 21 and a half hour course, and there's no prerequisites aside from just HTML. We start from absolute scratch. Alright, so let's take a look at this application. So if I try to search without any search term, it's just going to give us an alert that says, please add a search term. We're using Bootstrap 4 for our UI. And if I put something in here, like let's say burgers, and search, you'll see it'll reach out to the Reddit API, and we're going to display a bunch of stuff. So we're going to display the image if there is one. If there isn't one, we're going to display this little Reddit guy, and then under the image we have the title, and then we have the self text if there is any. We're also going to truncate that, make it shorter if it's really long, and then we have a read more link that will open that Reddit or subreddit, whatever it is, in another tab. And then we also have the name of the subreddit and the score down at the bottom in a Bootstrap badge. Alright, and these are card columns, so it gives it that grid look. Alright, so that's what we'll be building, guys. Hopefully you enjoy it, and let's get started. Hey guys, if you've been watching my videos for a while and you really like what I do and I've helped you out a lot, consider becoming a patron. Even for $1 per month, it pushes me to keep bringing you guys the best content I possibly can. There's reward tiers for discounts, free Udemy courses, personal support, and more. So check out the Patreon link in the description below for more info. Alright, so we're going to get started here. First thing we need to do is set up Parcel, which is very, very easy. If you've never used it or even heard of it, don't worry about it. It's a package manager similar to Webpack, but it's zero configuration, so it's very, very simple to set up. So what we're going to do is just create a new folder for our project. I'm just going to create it on my desktop, and I'm going to call it Find It, F-I-N-D-D-I-T. And we're going to go ahead and open that with VS Code or whatever text editor you want to use is fine, and we'll just bring that over here. Okay, we'll just split that up, and then what we're going to do is go to parceljs.org if you don't already have it installed, and just go to get started, and we can simply install it with either yarn or npm. I'm going to use npm, and we need to install it globally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my terminal in VS Code. You can use whatever terminal you want, but I'm going to go ahead and do npm install, or -g, and then we want to do parcel-bundler, okay, and that will install it for us. And that's really all we have to do to get it installed. You can then run it from absolutely anywhere. Alright, so now that that's done, what we're going to do is create our package.json file with npm init. So package name is good, version, description we'll just say, let's say Reddit search app, and entry point index.js is good, and go through this. Author, you can put your own name if you want. And license, I'll say MIT. Alright, so we have our package.json file. Now what we want to do is create an index.html file, and we also want to create an index.js file. Okay, so this is going to be our source code. What Parcel is going to do is it's going to package it up for us, and it's going to put it into a dist folder, and that will be the actual code that we can deploy, and you can simply upload it to a shared host or however you want to deploy it. Alright, so if we look at the Parcel documentation here, basically all we need to do is include our index.js file, and then we can run parcel index.html, and that will actually start a dev server. So let's do that. Let's go to our index.html. I'm going to use Emmet just to put in some default head body tags, stuff like that, and we'll go ahead and change the title to Find It, and then we're going to just reference that index.js file. So we're going to put a script tag here with the source of ./index.js and save that. And then in our index.js, let's simply do an alert. We'll just say alert 123 and save. All right, so now what we need to do is simply run this command right here, parcel index.html. All right, now what that did is it compiled everything into this dist folder. So if we look in here, we have an index.html, we have a source map, and we have a findit.js file. So we don't touch these. This is our compiled code. This is what we want to work on, and we can actually create modules, and we can import them using either CommonJS or ES6 modules. Okay, and it'll all get compiled into this one JavaScript file, and that's what we use. That's what we deploy. All right, but while we're working, we have this dev server that runs on localhost 1234. So let's go to that. We'll say HTTP, and let's go to localhost 1234, and there we go. We see our alert 123. Okay, so we'll just get rid of that. I just wanted to test it out, make sure that that's connected, and then we're going to go back to our HTML and we're going to create our UI before we start to get into the functionality. Now we're going to be using Bootstrap, so I'm going to grab the CDN from bootstrapcdn.com, and we want to go right here. Just get the CSS, this link tag. I'm going to copy that and put that right above the title. Okay, we don't need the JavaScript for anything, so we just need the CSS. And then for the UI, it's pretty simple, so what I'm going to do is just paste it in and go over it instead of typing it all out. I know most of you guys already know a lot of this stuff. I do have a Bootstrap course on Udemy too. If you just search Bootstrap, it'll be the first result. So we'll paste this in. I'm going to close this up and we're going to go over it. All right, so at the top here, I'll just save it. And at the top we have a Navbar, which is very simple, no links or anything. It just has a container inside of it. It has the brand, and it has a class of BG primary and Navbar dark, which makes it blue with white text. Okay, and then under that we have our search container, which is this whole section here. Anything with an ID we're going to be grabbing within the JavaScript. Okay, the classes are just Bootstrap, they're just for style. So we have a container that restricts this box in the middle. The div with the ID of search is this whole thing as well. And then that has a class of card and card body. BG light gives it the gray background. And then our form has an ID of search form. We have our first field, our input field, wrapped in a class of form group, has an ID of search input. Anywhere where you see these MB classes, these are just margin bottom classes. They're just pushing stuff down. Okay, and then this is for the checkbox. So this is the first checkbox here, the sort by relevance, and then we have the second one, which is the sort by latest. Okay, and notice that they have the class of form check input, and also the wrapper class has a class of form check and form check inline, which makes it go horizontal. And then we have the limit, so we have the select list. It has a name of limit, ID of limit, and then we have all of our options, and 25 is selected by default. And then finally we have our button, and then right under that we have our results. This is where everything's going to go that we search for and we output, but we're going to generate it within the JavaScript and then output it. All right, and this result should go under the div with the ID of search. Okay, so that div ends here, and then we have our results. So now that we have that all set, now it's time for the JavaScript, which is the main part of this tutorial. So first thing I'm going to do is just bring in a couple things. Let's bring in the search form. So we're going to say document dot, we're going to use get element by ID. And remember we gave that an ID of search dash form. Okay, we also want the input value. So we'll say search input. Set that to document dot get element by ID. And that had an ID of search dash input. All right, so let's add let's add an event listener to the form. Okay, so when this form gets submitted, we want something to happen. So let's take the search form variable, and we're going to call add event listener, and then the event that we want to listen on is going to be a submit event. Okay, and then when that runs, we want to run a function. Now we could put a callback function like that, but I'm just going to use an arrow function. And when you have an event listener, you can pass in an event parameter as well. So we want to put an E here as a parameter for our function, and then use an arrow, and then inside this arrow I'm going to say e.prevent default to prevent the form from actually submitting to a file. Okay, and we'll test this out by just saying console log, and let's just console log 123. We'll open up our console with F12, and let's go ahead and make sure, let's reload this and just type anything in search, and now you can see we get 123 down here. Alright, so our event listener is hooked up. Now what we want to do is we want to get the sort by, we want to get the input, and we want to get the limit. So let's say, let's get search term. So I'll create a variable called search term, and we'll set that to the search input, which we have defined above, but we want the value from it. Okay, so we want to make sure we do that, and then we can just test that out real quick. Alright, so now whatever I type in here shows down here. We log it. Alright, next thing we'll do is get, let's say get sort. So we'll say const sort by. Now there's a few different ways you can get checkboxes, or I should say radio buttons. We're going to use query selector, and then we're going to use a special selector called checked, or I guess it's a pseudo selector. So let's say query selector, and this works just like jQuery. Basically, we can use any kind of selector. So we're going to say any input that has the name of sort by, okay, which is both of them, the relevance and the latest, but we want the one that's checked, so we want to use :checked. Okay, and let's see if we can get that. We'll say sort by. Alright, so now I'm gonna just, relevance is checked by default. Oh, actually, you know what, we need the value. Alright, so we get relevance, click this one, and we get new. Okay, go back, relevance, go back, new. Good. So that's working. Now we want to get the limit. So for that, let's create a variable called search limit, and I'm going to set that to document.getElementById. Has an ID of limit, and we're talking about the select list here, right here, ID of limit, and then we want the value, of course. Alright, and just to test that out, let's take this console log here and just move it down, and let's change this to search limit. So now whatever I choose, let's say 10, we get that down here. Good. So the next thing I want to do before we move on to making our request to Reddit and all that, I want to make sure that we can't submit an empty form, an empty input. So let's say check input, and for that we're just going to do a simple if, and we're going to say if search term is equal to nothing, then what do we want to do? We want to show a message. Okay, so we're going to create a custom function called show message, and then this will take in two things. One's going to be the message, so we'll say, not show, we'll say please add a search term, and then the second will be the class that we want to add to the div, because we want it to be a Bootstrap alert message. So I'm going to say alert dash danger. All right, so let's create that function. We want to go outside of this event listener. In fact, I'm going to put a comment here that says form event listener. And then we'll go down here outside of it, and let's say show message, and we'll say function show message. Okay, and that's, remember, that takes in two things. It takes in the message itself, and it takes in a class name. Now this is going to be the same message show message function that we used quite a bit in the Udemy course. It's going to basically create the alert div from scratch. Okay, so we're going to use some DOM manipulation methods with vanilla JavaScript. So first thing we want to do is create the div. So we'll say, let's say const, create a variable called div, and we'll set it to document.createElement, which does just that. And the element we want to create is a div. Next thing we want to do is add our classes to that div. So we can just say div.className and set that to what we want. Now I'm going to use backticks here because I'm going to use a variable. So this is a template string. It's part of ES6. Now with Bootstrap, your class should be alert and then whatever the color you want or the type. In this case, alert danger. But remember, this alert danger is coming in right here. It's coming in as this parameter class name. So instead of putting this, we want to put a variable. So we want to use this syntax, and we want to say class name. Okay, because if we put alert success in here, it'll be a green. It makes it more scalable. We can just put alert success if we want a green, or if we want blue, we can do alert info or whatever blue is, and so on. All right, so next thing we want to do is add the text. Obviously we need some text in our message, and that's going to come from this right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that div and we're going to append a child to it, which means we're going to put something inside of it, and we want to put a text node. And in JavaScript, to create a text node, you use create text node. Okay, now you could put some text in here, but obviously we want our message, so I'm going to put the message variable that comes coming in from here. Okay, so we're almost there. Now that we created everything, we need to get it into the DOM so it displays. So we want to do two things. We want to get the parent container, which is going to be this div right here with the ID of search container, and then we also want the div that we want to put it before, which is going to be this div with the ID of search. So we want to get those two things. So let's say const search container equals document.getElementById search dash container, that's the parent, and then we want to get search, so we'll say const search getElementById search. All right, so now all we have to do is insert the message. So we're going to take the container, search container, and just call a method called .insert before, which does just that. It inserts before. So we want to insert the div before the search element so that it shows right up here. So let's save that. Let's try it out. We'll reload and we'll leave this blank and click search, and there we go. Please add a search term. Now, as it is now, it's just going to stay there, and I don't want that. I want it to go away after a certain amount of time. So we're going to say timeout alert, and we're going to use a function called set timeout, which is just a JavaScript function, and it takes in a callback. So we could do function, but I'm going to use an arrow. So I'm just going to put an empty set of parentheses and then an arrow, and all I want to do here is remove the alert. So we're going to say document dot get element by ID. Actually, no, it's a class, so we're going to use query selector. So dot alert, and then we want to remove it, so we can say dot remove. All right, now this set timeout takes a second parameter, so we want to go put a comma here, and then the amount of time that we want it to wait. So we'll say 3000, which is 3000 milliseconds, which is 3 seconds. So let's test it out. We'll reload and we'll click search, and then it should go away in 3 seconds. There we go. All right, so that functionality is taken care of. I know that was quite a bit, but I think it's good to create it from scratch within the JavaScript, rather than like creating a div with alert and alert danger, because if we do that, we'll have this red line, and it gets kind of messy. So I think it's good to do it that way, even though it's a little longer. All right, so now that we have that done, let's move on. So let's see, we checked the input. Once we enter something in search, I want this to clear up. So all we have to do for that is take the search input dot value and set that to nothing. Okay, and then we're finally ready to search Reddit. So what we're going to do here is, obviously we're going to use the fetch API, but I want to do this in a different file. Okay, that's basically the reason I use Parcel, is so that we could use modules. So we're going to create a new file in the root here. Make sure it's not in your dist folder. And we're going to call this Reddit API.js. All right, and then in this Reddit API, we're going to export default. It's going to be an object, and we're going to have a function called search. All right, and this is where we're going to make our request. Now, in our index file, we have to bring in this module. So we're going to go up to the very top, and let's say import. I'm going to use ES6 syntax. We can do that with Parcel. And we'll say import Reddit from /Reddit API. Just like that. And then down here, when we want to search Reddit, we can use that excuse me, we can use that variable that we just assigned, so Reddit, and we can call the search function like that. And we're actually going to have it return a promise, so we will be doing like .then. But for now, let's just pass in our search term. Let's pass in the search limit, and let's pass in sort by. Okay, and these are all things that we defined up here. Search term, all this stuff here. We're just passing it into our Reddit search function. All right, so we'll go back to the Reddit API.js. And just to make sure that this is getting called, let's do a console log, and let's just say search. Okay, so now if we reload and we type something in and search, we can see that that's connected. Okay, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the fetch API here. So we're gonna say fetch, and we're gonna pass in the URL. So the URL is gonna be http www.reddit.com/search, and then we want to do .json, and then we want a query. So we're going to put question mark, which allows us to use a URL parameter, q equals, so query equals, and then our search term. And remember, this should actually take in our search term, our search limit, and our sort by. So we want this to be our search term. Now I actually wanted to use backticks here, so we don't have to do any concatenation or anything. We can simply go like that. Okay, so it's going to equal search term. So with the fetch API, we do a .then. Okay, but this isn't actually going to give us the data, this first .then. It gives us the response, and then we need to basically say that we want that response in JSON. And then we do another .then, and it gives us the data. All right, so we'll say data and let's use an arrow function, and let's just console.log the data. Alright, so we'll save that and reload, and let's type in here burgers. I don't know why I chose burgers, but I did. And then it gives us this, it gives us an object with a kind of listing and then data. Data is what we're interested in. So if we look in data, you can see it has this children object, which is actually an array of objects, 25 by default. And these are our posts. So in our posts, we have another data. So we have some digging to do to get to what we want. And in this data is where all the stuff is. So if we go down to like title, which is, you can see there's a lot of stuff, but the title is here. We have the URL. We have the permalink. So this is where all the stuff is. So we have quite a bit of digging to do in the API. Now, before we do that, I just want to add the rest of our parameters, because in addition to the query, we can put another parameter with the ampersand, and we can say sort, and we're going to set that equal to our sort by. All right, and then we'll do another one, and we'll say limit equals, and we'll set that to our search limit. Okay, and I probably should have showed you the Reddit API documentation. We'll say Reddit API search. And let's see. So right here, yeah, so see, it can take limit, maximum, default is 25, as you saw, maximum 100. Q is a query, which is a string no longer than 512 characters. And what else did we do? Sort, which can be relevance. We did relevance and new. You can also do hot, top, and comments if you want. And then there's some other stuff here if you want to experiment. So this is the information for the search endpoint. All right, so now that we did that, let's figure out what we want to return. I don't want to return just that data object because there's just so much stuff. I don't want to return this. So we're going to go data and then dot data, which will be that. All right, so let's log this, data dot data, and then what do we want? Children. So dot children, and that will give us, that will basically give us the array, this array here, right? So if we try it, what did I do? Sort by is not defined. Let's see, what did I do? I didn't capitalize the B. All right, and let's test the limit too. We'll do 5. Okay, so now we're looking at data.data.children, which gives us the array of posts. Now I don't want to return the object. I want to use the map high order function to get just the data. So what we can do here is, let's not log this, let's return this. So we'll go like that, but then we'll take the map function and we'll pass in data and set that to data.data. So that way we're returning just this part of these objects. Okay, because that's what we want. We don't care about the kind. We just want this. All right, and then the last thing we want to do here is return this whole fetch, because what this does is it allows us to make our search function return a promise. Okay, because fetch returns a promise and we're returning that. So we can now do search.then in our index file. One thing I did forget is I just want to add a .catch in case there's some kind of error. When we have promises, we can do catch and we'll say error and we'll just console log it like that. Okay, so that's our whole file. That's all we need. And if you wanted to add to this and you wanted to use other endpoints or something from the Reddit API, you could add another function like I don't know, popular or something like that. All right, but we just want this to be a search app for now. So now let's go back here, and this should now return a promise. So we can say dot then, actually let's put this on a new line, dot then, and then what it's going to give us is the data, or I'll call it results. So results, we'll use an arrow, and then let's make sure we're actually getting something. So we'll say console log results and save. All right, let's try it. And there we go. So 25 results, and you can see it's now just the data. We're not getting the type, or what was it, kind T3 or something like that. We're just getting the data because we did the map. We mapped it to that. These high order functions are really, really handy. All right, so now that we have the results, we want to output them into our UI. So let's create a variable called output. And I'm using let because I'm going to be manipulating it. I'm going to start it off with just a div. Actually, it'll be a div with the class, and we're going to use Bootstrap's card columns. So we'll go ahead and give it a class of card columns. And then let's see, we're going to want to loop through our results and then create a card for each one. But before we do the loop, let's go down here and let's say output plus equals, which is an append. We're not overwriting output, we're adding to it the ending div to that div we just created. Okay, but in here we want to loop through our results. So we'll take that results that we got from our reddit.search from the promise, and we'll call for each, okay, which is another high order function that just loops through an array. So we'll say results.forEach, and in here we'll say post. We'll use an arrow function, and then I actually just want to put a comment right here. We'll say loop through posts. So in here we want to take that output variable and append to it, so plus equals, and I'm going to use a template string so that we can use variables within it. And we just want a Bootstrap card for each of these posts. So if I go to getbootstrap.com and I go to documentation, components, and card, I'm just going to grab this right here, this first one, and stick that in there. Okay, and I'm just going to get rid of this inline style right here with the width. We don't want that. And then we can fill in all of our dynamic content that comes from this post. All right, but before we do that, let's see if we can output it onto the screen when we search. So we'll go down below the output right here, and remember we have that ID of results, which is right here. This is where we want to output everything. So we'll simply say document dot get element by ID results inner HTML equals output. Okay, and that'll output all of this from here, all of the looping through all the cards, and then the ending div. So let's save that, and let's reload this and just search for burgers. And now we're just going to get a bunch of static cards because we haven't filled in anything, any dynamic content. All right, so let's put in the title right here. So we can use this syntax, and we can take the post that comes from here, and we can call dot title. So if I were to now search for burgers, you can see that now we're getting dynamic titles. Now this here, in the paragraph, this is where I want to put, what is it, the self text, I believe it's called. You know what, let's console log our results, and just so we can see what's available. So we'll go right here and say results. All right, so if we look in here, we have I think it's self text that I want. Right, yeah, self text. And notice that this doesn't have, some of them it's just blank, but if there is self text, I want it to display here. So we're going to go ahead and say post.self text, and let's save that. Okay, now undefined, why? It shouldn't be undefined. Oh, I put a capital T here. It's all lowercase. Okay, so now this is the self text. Notice how long some of them are. Actually, there's only one that has it, and it's really long. So I want to create a truncate function that will shorten this up. So we're going to go down below our show message, and let's say truncate text, and we'll create a function called truncate text, which will take in two things. It'll take in a string, we'll call it my string, and a limit. Actually, let's call it text and limit, and then we'll say const, let's say shortened, and what we'll do is set it to text dot index of, because I don't want this I don't want it to cut off in the middle of a word. So what we're doing here is we're making sure that it's going to actually be the end of a word when it gets cut off. So we're going to put a space, and we also want to pass in our limit. All right, and then we want to say if shortened is equal to -1, then we want to return text. This index of, if it doesn't match a space, then it's going to return -1. Okay, and then finally we just want to return text dot substring, and in here we're going to pass it. We want to start at 0, and then whatever the shortened is going to be the second parameter. And there's plenty of truncate functions you can find. Just search Stack Overflow if you don't like this one, but this one seems to work all right. So now we can just wrap the self text in truncate text. Oops. Okay, and let's see, that's going to take in a second parameter of however long we want this. So I'm going to make this, let's say, 100 words long, and save, and let's try this again and see how long that text is. Okay, so there we go. And I'm sorry, not 100 words, 100 characters. So that's all set. Now let's do the image, because right now we're just having this blank image here. There's no source. Now this is where things can get tricky, because not every post has an image, and the images are actually stored in a preview object inside of an images array, and some of them don't even have the preview object, so we have to do some testing before we can output it, or else it'll be undefined. So if we look at, let's say, this first one, and we go down to preview, if it has it, which it does. Okay, some of them do not have this, so we have to test for it. But if we look in here, it's the images is tucked away. So we have preview, then we have images, which is an array, and the array has one value in it, and that's an object. If we look in that object, we have another object called source, and that source has the URL. So that's where we get the image URL. So it's really tucked in there, and that's what's difficult about working with APIs, is just grabbing the data, because sometimes it's just so far in there, and you have to do a bunch of maps and all this crap, and if statements to check and see if it's there, if it's undefined. So what we'll do is check for this preview. If it has it, then we'll navigate to this URL and use that as our image source. So we're going to go above the output, but still within the loop, within the for each, and we're going to say check for image. Okay, so we're going to say let image equals post.preview. Now what I'm going to do here is use a ternary operator, which is like a shorthand if statement. So I'm going to say post preview, and then we use the ternary operator, and we say post.preview. We basically want to find this URL. We're saying if this exists, then let's grab this URL, which is post.preview. Remember, there was an array called images. We want the first value, so 0, and then we want the source, and then we want the URL. Okay, else, okay, so the colon is else, then we just want to use the little Reddit guy, which I forget. Let me just search, we'll say Reddit image, and I think I used this one. Is that the one I used? Let's see. No, it wasn't that one. Oh, it was this one right here. So I'm going to say view image, and then I'm just going to grab this URL. So we're basically saying if post preview exists, we want to grab the image. If not, then we're going to use this static image. So we're just going to put that in. All right, so hopefully you guys understand that. You could use an if statement here. It would just be longer. And then what we'll do is go to the image tag into the source, and we can now just put image, which is this variable. Okay, I guess I could use const here. Different people have different opinions about let and const. I like to use const unless I know it's going to change. But you know, some people like to use let all the time, and it's just preference. So let's try this out. We'll save. We'll reload. Burgers, and there we go. So now we're getting all the images, and this one, for instance, doesn't have the preview, so it's showing that little Reddit guy, and you can use a different image if you want. Alright guys, so we are almost there. Now what we want to do is let's see, let's do the link. So we're going to go down to this A tag, and we're going to add right here, we can just do post.url, and then I just want to make sure that it opens in a new tab, so we're going to say target equals blank, and then we'll change the text from go somewhere to read more. So let's try that out. Okay, read more, and there we go. Okay, so let's search for something else. Let's do JS. There we go. So just some JavaScript stuff, PHP. So we can search for anything. And the limit, if we want to do 5 PHP, it gives us 5 results. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Columns is a little weird, but let's see. Let's do latest 10. Whoops. PHP latest 10. And there we go, 10 results. Okay, so I also want to add the subreddit and the score down here at the bottom. So I think that's all we have left to do. So let's go under the A tag. Let's put an HR, and let's put a span. I can't use Emmet in here, huh? Span. Let's do class badge, and let's do badge dash secondary, which will make it gray. Wow, I haven't actually typed out ending HTML tags in a long time. And we'll say subreddit, and we can get that with post.subreddit. Okay, and then we're going to do another span with a badge. So what I'll do is just let's see, we'll just copy this down, and let's change it from badge secondary to badge dark, and let's change the text to score, and we can get this with post.score. Alright, so let's try it. Okay, there we go, subreddit, score, and let's make sure it's responsive. Good. We make it really small and it stacks. Awesome. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for this project. Now if you wanted to deploy this, you have your dist folder here with your compiled code in it. Now we didn't have to use Parcel for this. You could have taken the code that's in the Reddit API file, the search here, and put it right in your index.js and just use that. But I wanted to use Parcel because, I don't know, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to make it more scalable if you wanted to add more modules to it. You have the ability to use like post CSS and some other features of Parcel as well. I think it's a great technology. Alright, so that's it guys. If you like this video, please leave it a like, and I will see you in the next one.